Daniel Negreanu, pro poker legend. Daniel, you just launched a new podcast with your wife. Tell us about that, man.
Yeah, the Mania podcast. My wife and I have been talking about it for quite a while. My wife is bipolar, so I mean, I imagine like if whether you have mental illness or I'm sure like it plays a role in your life, and she's pretty open and vulnerable about what that's like. We talk about the dynamic of me having to be the rock, and we just sort of shoot the shit for a couple hours and have fun with it every week, and we're releasing them every Tuesday.
Right on. Is there anything specific you guys talk about, or is it just a freewheel open forum?
Well, the main crux of it is just her bipolar diagnosis and how we deal with that and other people. But again, it does go into it goes where it goes. It's a conversation between a husband and a wife who we communicate pretty well. We have a good chemistry. So yeah, we cover a wide variety of subjects. But that's the main issue. The main thing we focus on is her bipolar.
What are the chances hockey comes up in the conversation in one of the episodes?
I believe in episode 1, we did talk about Robin Lehner, right?
Okay.
Because
Yes,
Robin
you did.
Lehner is also somebody who is bipolar. We had a clip out about him. And, he actually said something quite interesting. 2 things, really. One was, he said if he could give advice, he would tell people not to share their diagnosis because he feels like it hurt him with contract negotiations. He was only getting 1-year deals because I think people were a little like nervous about what this meant. But the thing that he said that really stuck out to me was at an awards ceremony, just because I have mental illness doesn't mean that I'm mentally weak, right? And I think when I hear that, I think of my wife, who, she's the strongest, strongest mentally of any person that I know.
Very true, very true. Switching to hockey, these Toronto Maple Leafs 11-6-2 start. What's your take on this first? I think we darn near approaching the quarter mark of the season here. What's your take so far?
Well, let me say this. I don't want to toot this too early because you never know, but what they look like is a team that's playing playoff hockey for once. You look at their numbers and they're, among the best defensive teams in the league. And, I look at the pairing of Tanev and McCabe, which sort of came out in about mid-October, and they're just the shutdown pair of shutdown pairs. They're facing top competition every night. And, they're not only holding their own, they're shutting them down pretty good. And I think that's something maybe the Leafs, if you look at the last 5-6 years or so, you got the offense, sure, in the regular season, we can score 6 or 7. Then what about the playoffs, right? But being able to play like a defensive structure, I think the coach is doing a good job of setting them up for success down the road.
Well, that's exactly where I was going to lead to, is like Craig Berube just feels like a natural fit. Now there's going to be ups, there's going to be downs. We've seen it throughout this season, but you're so right. I just think the brand and the style is more conducive to success and having success in the Stanley Cup playoffs, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as flashy. Obviously, Matthews is out right now, but even when he's been playing, he's been more defensive-minded, being more cognizant of that and understanding, Ovechkin said it a couple of years ago, I think. He's like, they have to decide when they're ready to win, right? Because, again, they've always been a team on paper that you look at in the regular season, you're like, woo, high-flying stuff, and then, the playoffs is a very different animal. And so, and I wonder, how much longer you can keep this nucleus together. How many more years do they have before they sort of have to start thinking about retooling? And, this to me, and again, it's early and I hate to jump the gun because so much can happen. But if they're playing like this going into the stretch and in the playoffs, considering Boston's weaker, I think Tampa's weaker, Florida by then is going to have played so much hockey. Okay. They won the cup. They made the finals. These guys are going to be beat down by then, I think. So the Leafs have a really good path. I think this year has to be the one where, they do the damage.
Well, speaking of that nucleus, Mitch Marner and John Tavares specifically have been coming out red hot starts for both of them. What's your take on those two guys? Obviously, contract years for them. Would you like to see something done with them contract-wise, or would you rather wait till after the season in particular and see how things shake out?
Well, I think right now, if you heard Elliot Friedman mention that the cap may be going up. If the cap goes up, this gives them a lot more leeway to keep this nucleus together. But then you got to ask yourself the question, is this the right nucleus, right? You look at some rebuilds like in Buffalo or Ottawa, and some of them have been slowed, and Buffalo rebuilt and then they rebuilt again during the rebuild, So the question is, are these guys, the right group to lead you to a Stanley Cup? And if not, can Craig Berube sort of turn them into one? And it feels like so far, they're buying into what he's selling in terms of system, and they have a decor that, and a goalie. Where did he come from all of a sudden? That's been an issue too for them. So, putting all the parts together, I could see them, I don't know about Tavares in terms of what number he's going to get, right? You imagine he's going to take a big hit there, but I think he'll do just fine in terms of his finances.
The big one for me is Marner because he's so polarizing for many reasons. Like we know what this guy brings in the regular season. We joked about this in July, and it's playing out. He's having a storybook season. He might eclipse 100 points for the first time in his career. But for me, there's always that thing in the back of my head, like what is he going to look like come playoff time? That's why I kicked this can down the road, Daniel. I really would on Marner at least.
Yeah, for sure. A lot of I'm doing the fantasy drafts going into the year. Marner was a high valued target, because this is a contract year. And hey, what do you know? Hockey players seem to play a little harder, you know what I mean, in contract year. But you're right. Like I think for a lot of fans, their frustration with him is, in the playoffs, and is he the kind of guy in your nucleus that, can show up when it matters most? And I think this is going to be I think like with him, if I were management, I would wait to see what the playoffs look like rather than gauge him on regular season. Because let's be honest, the regular season for the Leafs doesn't mean a whole lot. They're gonna make the playoffs. It's just a question of where you stand in there. And as we've seen in the last 5-6 years, it doesn't really matter. Get in, get to the dance. If you're Tampa, whoever, you got a shot. And so for the Leafs, I think really being focused on playoffs, even now, is the way to go and setting yourself up for success.
Mm-hmm. As far as some of the new acquisitions on this roster, there's some new bodies out there, and some of them are certainly making some noise and doing their part. Who's been your favorite so far as new players on the Maple Leafs?
Well, OEL's always been an interesting one, right? Because he looks like sort of, offensive. Like he adds to the team in a lot of different ways. And I think like maybe he struggled for a little bit, but now that they sort of figured out the defensive pairs and maybe give him a little more sheltered minutes, I think he's been a good addition there. I think too, looking at sort of, the depth of the team is an opportunity right now with Matthews out. I think it's a good opportunity to see what you got right internally. It's very difficult when you make the playoffs every year and you're a high, you have a high point total. It's hard to get those top draft picks. So a Bobby McCann or, a Nick Robertson has to step up, not necessarily high pedigree guys, but in order to win a cup, I think like, especially with a cap, you need those guys to really outperform their contracts.
So important. And obviously the big topic in these parts right now is the Ryan Reaves, suspension. Were you buddies with him when he was on Vegas? What would you make of the suspension?
I'll be honest with you. When Ryan Reaves played here, he's a tough physical guy, but this isn't a guy. He's not a headhunter. Okay. He's actually a very clean player. If you think about it, I remember he got a penalty out here one time where he absolutely demolished a guy. The guy, it's so loud in the arena. The refs looked at each other and go, I don't know, that must have been a penalty, right? They blew a whistle. They called a penalty. It was a totally clean hit. Now, this wasn't a clean hit, right? But his intention was clear. He had no intention of actually going for the head. He just missed. He elevated at the wrong time. I think he gets the 5 games, which is probably fine. And a lot of it has to do with reputation. But I don't think, if you ask around, like his reputation isn't a dirty player. He's not. He doesn't go after, the 5'9" Patrick Kane speedsters. He goes after the other big guys in the team who do damage, and he's fair, And I get the 5 games because, the hit is dangerous. But I don't think if you look at intention, anyone being honest with themselves can say, yep, he meant to hurt him. No way.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think he plays hard and he plays fair. But as far as yourself, no stranger to betting and getting involved in that side of things, do you bet on hockey and do you bet on the Maple Leafs? And if so, what kind of angles do you look at when you're doing so?
I used to bet a lot, but I'll tell you what, if you want to be successful at betting, you have to take it like a full-time job, right? Just sort of looking at the slate and going, I like them tonight. Now you have to look really deep into the numbers. And obviously I live in Las Vegas, so I have access to, some guys with quant and, some, what they call it steam, right? The steam players, all the bookies try to keep them away because they win. And, hockey's certainly a beatable game. But again, if you want to really actually win, you have to really, take it like a full-time job. So I haven't done that in quite a few years, but during the playoffs, I usually do. During the playoffs, I throw out my series bets and I crush those. Well, let's be real. I've actually done really, really well in series bets in the playoffs because I think like hockey is a high variance game. So generally speaking, as a strategy, because any team can win, taking juice back is usually, the preferred play because favorites are typically slightly overpriced, to say the least. So when you can find value on underdogs, that was always sort of my go-to in terms of my strategy. But in a 7-game series, well, now, variance is a little less impactful. It still plays a role, but the better team is usually going to win over 7 games, a lot more so than over 1.
I kid you not, like 3 years in a row, I bet on the Leafs series in the first round to go 7 games, and I kept hitting, and there was incredible value. But like the reason why we asked that question is because from the Leafs perspective, there's just so much money coming in on this team on a nightly basis. They're always the favorite. Like it doesn't matter who they play, Daniel.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, and that's bookies just sort of trying to balance in their budget. So for a lot of people that don't know how that works is if you're a bookie, all you want is equal action on both sides, right? So what you actually think the line should be is less relevant than where the money's coming from, because if it's an even split on both sides, you just make money at no risk. So no question, Toronto's like the center of the hockey world, right? So a lot of people put a lot of money on there. So there's inflated prices, which means, frankly, if you're a Sharpie, you probably want to be taking the other side more often than not.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I noticed that for sure. It's just got to be volume on. I equate it to like Tiger Woods. You're trying to bet on him. He doesn't have, a chance in hell in some tournaments, and he's right in the top couple of favorites to win strictly on volume. And for that reason, it's tough. Is there a way to get around that? If I don't like to bet against the Toronto Maple Leafs, I like to cheer for them. And I always just find that there's no value in betting on them. Is there some ways around that, or is it just what it is?
Maybe the only bet you can make then is like their goal total or betting some overs and stuff like that, some over-unders. But yeah, again, I mean, that's the thing. If you're doing it for entertainment purposes and you want to have a little extra, cheese on the game, betting on the home with the home team hard is fine. But like, again, as financial advice, it's typically not going to give you the biggest yield, I wouldn't say.
So you're unique in the fact that you're a Leafs fan and a Golden Knights fan. I'm looking forward to Wednesday and Ilya Samsonov, that video tribute. I don't know if he's going to play in that game, but how bittersweet was it for you to see Samsonov sign in Vegas after everything surrounding him the last couple of years in Toronto?
Yeah, there's sort of been a little bit of a link the last few years with Toronto and Vegas, obviously with Ryan Reaves going there, who was beloved here in Las Vegas more than anywhere else. And then, you had Max Pacioretty go there. And this is guys move around, right? But in terms of the goalie situation, we had another one of our own homecomings. We had Logan Thompson come back, yesterday to a big tribute and stuff like that. And it's part of the league. Guys move around, but I don't know if I would call it bittersweet necessarily. I don't know that Samsonov, he's not our main guy. He's the 1A, if you will, behind Aiden Hill, and but he's been good. He's been good.
Speaking of goaltenders, we've got 2 goaltenders with a lot of fanfare going on. Stoley's been hot out of the gates, obviously, with an injury to Joseph Woll. But long term, who's your pick to be the guy that they go to in the playoffs this year?
That's always injury related, I think.
Yeah.
It just depends. Like, because I mean, when you think of the goalie position, right? Like these guys lose like 5 to 10 pounds after a game, during a game. They sweat so much going on, and I think because of the necessity to be so flexible and to be limber, like how you're feeling going in is going to be the number one predictor. If I had to guess, I'm going to say Stoley because, he's been great and there's no reason to doubt whether or not, he can do the job. He's been doing the job in the system. He's got a good, like a good defensive core in front of him that I think, can I think it makes the goalie's job a lot easier when you have that structure. And, we talk about that in Las Vegas a lot, in terms of our D, because our D is good. Like you have Pietrangelo, you have Theodore, you have Hannafin. You have McCabe, you've got shutdown guys. So if you're a goalie there, where they're going to be, they're going to take the rebounds and things like that. And that, that can have a big say in terms of what goalie numbers look like.
Before we let you go, we need a Phil Kessel update. You've been playing much poker. I know he's your buddy.
Well, it's funny because he hasn't retired, right?
I know.
He's like, he was still looking to play. He could have played last year, late in the season. I think he was looking to play this year. He's not a big fanfare guy, but at this point, it doesn't look like anybody's going to bite. He didn't play the entire season last year. So yeah, he's just, he's a poker player now. He's, he likes to play pot limit Omaha. That's his game. But he calls himself a fish, and that's a accurate description. A fish is, that's not a good thing in poker. You don't want to be the fish. He's a little bit of a fish.
I saw isn't he hosting his own poker tournament soon?
Yeah, he's getting more involved, in the poker space at this point. I think like I said, he just I was disappointed that he didn't play last year. Like I thought he could have played with the Vancouver Canucks, and that could have happened, but it just didn't pan out. Because I think he has more to. I think he had more to give. Like when he was pulled, like he's the Iron Man. He's currently the Iron Man. And if he jumps back in, he's still the Iron Man. But I felt like he played was it, 4 games when we won our cup and played really well in those 4 games. You know, and then the team was as healthy as it's ever been. And all of a sudden he found himself in the press box. I was shocked. He was shocked, and he never got, you know, he never saw the ice again. I feel like that sort of weakened his market value.
Yeah, I don't know what the hell is going on. I look at San Jose specifically. I look at Chicago. Connor Bedard goes to bed at night praying for a winger. They just can't figure out a solution. Why not just stick Kessel with him? You're not winning the cup this year in Chicago, but we'll leave it at that. Daniel, always great catching up. Thank you so much for your time today.
All right, guys, have a good one.
Thanks, Daniel.
Make sure to check out more of our content right here on the Leafs Nation YouTube page. We got long form interviews, we got clips, we got epic rants by Jay Rosehill. We simply have it all. And don't forget, you can find out much more at theleafsnation.com. Thanks so much for watching.